It's a great holiday season as the last edition of 2016 for the Baseball Talk Radio Show moves on right now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Baseball Talk Radio Show. We got the sleigh bells in the background, ushering in the holiday season once again. Around here, we want to wish everyone a very happy holiday and a very happy New Year. How you doing, Gary?
I'm doing good, Rich, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you and yours, and a Happy Hanukkah to all our Jewish listeners out there. They going to have their first night of Hanukkah begins on Christmas Eve. I believe. So this year it's talk about being close together. To both holidays are right on top of one another, and a little rare, but season's greetings to everybody out there, no matter what faith or religion or race you are, whatever you celebrate. Have a good time. Have a safe time, too.
Absolutely. 'Tis the season to be jolly, they say. Fa la 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 la.
Well, that's what they say, but go to the shopping mall right about this time of year, and there's not a lot of jolly people there.
Now you can get in a big jam in a country minute. It was very funny. We were talking to a nurse just the other day, me and my wife, and she was mentioning about going out holiday shopping. She was in the mall behind people, and she said, I almost had a bit of a mall road rage because I couldn't get around people. I had to get into these certain stores, but everybody was blocking my way. So I wanted to pass them and going around them. And, it was very interesting to hear that comment because I myself, I don't go near the malls from about Thanksgiving on if I can help it.
I'm with you. I don't even go into a store. I do I do all my Christmas shopping online. It's the best way to go. It comes right to your door, and you can't beat it.
Yeah, and gift cards, things like that. People appreciate that, but you got to hand it to people who are out there, going to the malls, filling up them parking lots. Give them an A for effort at least, but I've never been the type to run out at the malls. I just sort of take another route, go the long way, so to speak, and try to avoid that. It's just it's tough.
It is, and when I was a kid, we growing up in Queens, we get our shopping done, and you walked everywhere when I was a kid. It's not like nowadays where you have to get a lift everywhere you go. We walked or bicycled, but I can remember going on Christmas Eve day and going down to they built the big Macy's by us, and eventually they put a mall up, but we go and sit there and just laugh our butts off and watch these people running around like crazy, trying to get gifts and stuff at the last second. Of course, we knew we could do it because we knew we were done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do everything online. I know some people don't like to do it. They think it's dangerous and whatnot, but it's much nicer, easier way to do it. You're not out in the cold. You're not braving, as you say, the crowds. And I just, as the older I get, I don't like crowds.
Yeah, it gets a little bit harder to get around, and especially with the crowds, as you said. And I try to save one or two things for the last minute because that sort of gives me more spirit during the holiday. I'll run out and get some cards and things like that. But the bulk of my shopping I try to do before all of the big rush at the malls. But, people do what they have to do. A lot of people are living week to week, paycheck to paycheck. Friday they get paid, they go out to the mall. So that's
It's true.
yep.
And
But
people have had traditions. I remember families that would not buy a Christmas tree until Christmas Eve. I guess two reasons: they were a little frugal, I guess would be the nice way of putting it, and you could get it, half price, 75% off at the last minute. But never was my family wasn't involved in that. We liked to have the tree up, but I can remember a couple of families that I knew that did it on Christmas Eve, and that was their tradition. Then it became, they would put the tree up on Christmas Eve, and but it's enough work just putting the tree up and getting everything wrapped um, just to have that extra stress on you on Christmas Eve.
yeah, that's a
I'd rather get it up early and get the presents underneath and not have to worry.
yeah. And I don't know about where our listeners live, but around my way, a lot of the tree places are sold out. They're closed up. They're gone. That once those trees are gone, they're gone. They don't restock generally. So I guess you have to have a reliable supplier to
Yeah.
tree up on Christmas Eve. But
And I can remember a few years where they had plenty of stock that they weren't, and so I guess the economy has improved over the last few years. People are going out and buying the trees, where years ago there were a couple of years I can remember where it was not a good year for tree sellers. But then again, it was a big market for artificial trees too. We ourselves have a artificial tree, and I like it that way.
yeah, me too. We just upgraded last year or 2 years ago to a pre-lit tree, which I even like better.
Yes.
We used to string the lights around, you
Yeah.
several sets of lights, and this is so much better.
Oh yeah, ours is in three pieces. You stick the pieces together, you plug the lights together, and in the wall, and it's lit. You do still have to put on the the uh, the ornaments, but that's okay.
Absolutely. Yep. That's makes all the season bright for everyone. And hope, like we said, everybody has a great time out there. And thank you for listening to this podcast all year. We've been doing a show like this for a long time. This is the first official year that we've kicked off the Baseball Talk Radio show. So I wanted to thank all of our listeners for hanging in there with us.
And Rich, yeah, I'd like to give my thanks too, and people are really starting to catch on to the show, and our numbers are doing very nicely. But we'd always like to double them, of course, or triple them. So I hope everybody will go and tell your friends about the Baseball Talk Radio show, as well as baseballtalkradio.com and all the shows on that, with your show and my show, and all the other shows that are covering baseball all year long. So go check it out, baseballtalkradio.com.
Yep. Talking about baseballtalkradio.com, one of the podcasts, the World Series winning podcast, Ivy Envy, that covers the Cubs, had an unfortunate incident in the last week and a half or so. Their site was hacked. Apparently, they sent out a memo to listeners and Facebook messages that, the only way that you can listen to their podcast temporarily till they get things squared away is through their app. So they have an Android app and an iTunes Apple app out there. But for right now, they got hacked, and their whole RSS feed, which generally feeds a lot of the online radio type Stitcher Radio, places like that. Even iTunes to a certain point takes RSS feeds. But yeah, they had a hack. Somehow the server that they were on went down. So listeners of Ivy Envy, if you haven't seen a podcast from them in a while, you might want to try to get their Android app temporarily until they get this squared away.
Wow, I didn't hear that, and that's really a shame. And It's crazy. Crazy stuff going on.
Speaking of crazy, um, our listeners will know what I'm. You have a
I have a Cleveland Indians hat on because it's my small protest to the MLB, I guess, and to the Cleveland Indians, who are slowly caving in and going to get rid of the Chief Wahoo. They're phasing it out. They're, I believe, removing it from the patches on the uniform, and they're going to phase out the hats and go with those ugly. I think the ugliest hats in baseball. Those stupid block letter C's. Look, if you want to get rit of it, that's okay, but at least come up with a design that looks good. I mean, that it's just a freaking block letter. It looks like somebody in kindergarten drew it. This is professional baseball. I mean, come on, come up with something. They had a thing in the 50s with a pointed C that was pretty sharp looking. Go back to that. But this thing is block C. So I'm urging anybody in Ohio or Indian fans, go out and buy your, boycott the C hats. That's what this is starting. Some people in Cleveland, they're going to boycott anything that's just got the C on it and just buy the Chief Wahoo hats and let them have all of these ugly looking C hats in stock that don't sell to anybody. So hopefully it'll work. But, those kinds of things normally don't work. And they're intent on getting rid of Chief Wahoo. And I just think it's one of the great logos in sports.
Yeah, that along with the Atlanta Braves hat, not a bad hat at all. I don't understand the reasons for it either. And over in Cleveland, they do say that they will still be wearing the caps for 2017, but apparently, possibly over the next couple years, they'll be phasing it out, possibly, or moving on from it in some way. But yeah, I think that's part of the Cleveland Indians organization now, and it would be very difficult for them to just drop it.
Yeah, and I, where does it end? What if, what if somebody comes and say we don't like a group of small people, we don't like the term giants or something, and we want that done, or bird watching groups don't like the Blue Jay logo. We find it offensive? I mean, I know it sounds a little ridiculous, but there's been things I've said for years that sounded ridiculous, and they were all coming to pass. And so it's just, we're getting back to the special interest groups, and I don't want to turn this into a political discussion. But we got to wake up in this country. There's too much of this political correct nonsense. And it's really, we're getting really stupid in this country. I hate to say it.
Right. Well, that hat looks very good on you, and it's got the postseason logo on the one side. And as you were telling me right before we started the podcast, it's got the new era flag type logo on the other side. And that's going to be a steady part of all MLB caps in 2017.
I believe so. I believe that's the new thing this season, that all the caps will have the new era flag on the left-hand side. And they already do it in the minor leagues. They have it, and I guess that's why they wanted to do it in the majors now. If they're paying for it, they're going to do it. If you look at some of these Dominican League teams and all of that, the Winter League teams, they've got patches like all over different companies. I hope they don't get to that.
Yeah, that would be a little ridiculous. But as we were talking about a couple podcasts ago, there's going to be a new company that's going to have the uniforms in a couple seasons. It's going away from Majestic, athletic and going over to Under Armour, and they're pretty well known for doing that in other sports in other countries. So, as you said, I think that would cheapen the sport a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, I could see, Majestic has the M or whatever their logo is on the sleeve. That's okay. It didn't, Rawlings did it when they had it, and that didn't bother me. You can live with stuff like that. It's when they get like these patches and they're all over the place, and um, then it just gets silly, and it just doesn't look right.
Well, we only have 103 days till opening day, and it kind of sounds like a long time, but I'm sure as the days click along here, we'll be getting very much closer to spring training, and then seeing the games, of course, of spring training, and then getting right up to opening day. But before that, Gary, we have the BBWAA, the Baseball Writers of America, with their ballot out. Of course, it was out since the summertime, but really the talk really starts to heat up around now as to who we expect will do well in the voting this year. And there's been a few shows that I've listened to already talking about the different players that have been on there for years. Will they make it in this year? Will they not? And of course, a whole lot of first year players back up on the ballot here for 2017. So we'll talk a little bit about that. What do you think about the top vote getters for this year?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm not all that impressed. I expect Bagwell will get in. He had 71.6% last year. So, what does he need? One or two more votes to go in his favor. Hold what he had and get another one or two votes, and he should be in. So, Tim Raines, he might get in. Though, I probably get some flack for this, but I don't see Tim Raines as a good player. I mean, strike that. As a Hall of Fame player, he was a very good player, but if you don't get in 10 years, obviously they didn't think the other 9 years he was worthy of getting in. So, I don't know. He'll get in on his, he had a high OPB or whatever they're using as a OPS. I don't know, whatever the heck the sabermetric things are, but even the Hall of Fame voting is starting to go towards sabermetrics, and that I don't like that trend at all, because I think you're going to see some guys you're going to say, what?
Yeah, there's a lot of sabermetric stats that can be skewed one way or another. WAR is one of the biggest ones. They add up some sort of calculations and tell you, well, he's 18 times better than an average player over the course of his career. And I don't buy that either. Looking at certain players and then looking at these WAR numbers, to me, it's a little hokey. Uh, but I'm looking over Bagwell's stats right now, and I never really considered him a Hall of Fame type player. But I guess, using the numbers that they use at baseballreference.com is a good indicator of, the career of some of these players. And his numbers sort of support that. So, claims that he's one of the sixth best first basemen ever uh, to play the game. So he does have the numbers to support him. Only one other player currently that he's compared with is a Hall of Famer, and that is Frank Thomas. But yeah, I think maybe Bagwell's time is this year. There was some talk about the steroid issue with him.
Mm-hmm.
He never claimed that he took steroids, nor did he, uh, talk about it at a great length. But that around that time was the time that a lot of this was going on. So, not so sure that he may be in one of those question marks, so to speak, about whether or not he used steroids.
And there's been talk about, will Billy Wagner get in? I don't think he will. He's a little further down the list. But what I don't understand is, and this might seem like a Mets fan talking, but how do you let Billy Wagner in ahead of John Franco? John Franco's the all-time left-handed save leader. How does Billy Wagner get more consideration and the possibility to get into the Hall of Fame when John Franco never got a comment about it? I don't understand that at all. I can't for the life of me understand that argument that where is Billy Wagner? Franco's got better numbers. So how could you let somebody in with lesser numbers? I don't get it unless it's that whole sabermetric crap again. And just going to Bagwell as one of the six best first basemen of all time. I don't buy that at all. I can probably name you six right off the top of my head that are in the Hall of Fame that are better than him already. I mean, Gehrig, you're going to compare him to Lou Gehrig? I don't think so. Bill Terry, Mel Ott. I mean, now I'm drawing a blank, but I mean, these guys are Hall of Famers, and wow, he's a little bit further down the list, and as you said, the WAR thing. I remember that Brian Kenny from MLB, he's one of these sabermetric nuts, and he was actually having a discussion with a sports writer, and the sports writer said, "You know how I can stop this discussion?" He said, "You once told me that Lou Whitaker had a better WAR than Derek Jeter. Now, who are you going to want in the seventh game of the World Series with 2 outs and the tying run or the winning run on base? Who are you going to want up at bat? Are you going to want Lou Whitaker or Derek Jeter?" I'm putting my money on Derek Jeter, and I think that's where the stats they cannot read clutch. They cannot read heart. And that's where it all breaks down, because you don't know what's inside a guy's chest. You can have all the stats in the world, and you can, as you say, you can skew them any which way you like. But when push comes to shove, who is the guy that's going to come through in a clutch? And the numbers can't tell you. They can give you a number and say, "Oh, he should be a good clutch hitter because blah, 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 this, that, that's that." But that doesn't always mean in the seventh game of the World Series with the pressure of the world on your back. And that's the thing I've got with the sabermetrics. And it'll be a shame if we start seeing guys getting into the Hall of Fame when you look back and scratch your head and said, "Man, I watched that guy's whole career. Look, he was a nice ball player, but he wasn't that good." And I mean, they come up with something. They were going through things where they'd rather have guys in positions. And I was shaking my head every time I watch MLB with that guy, because, he's talking about Adam Eaton, how great a center fielder he is and everything with that trade that the Nats went. And everybody I talk to says they think the Nats made themselves weaker because they got rid of a lot of potential pitchers and their top prospects for Adam Eaton. Oh, well, he shows that his numbers are blah, blah, blah. In the first place, he played right field mostly. So now they're going to put him in center. I'm not a numbers guy, and I apologize to the numbers people out there, but I think, watch the movie Trouble with the Curve. To me, that explains the whole thing.
Very good. A lot of ballot players on the list this year. Orlando Cabrera, Mike Cameron, Vladimir Guerrero, Manny Ramirez. We're going back to a few steroid type of names here. Ivan Rodriguez, and a few others. Melvin Morris, a couple of guys that you wouldn't even consider as quote-unquote Hall of Famers. Pat Burrell for the Phillies. He had a great career for the Phillies, but I don't know how he made it on this list for Hall of Famers. Matt Stairs, another one with the Phillies for a couple years with a ton of other teams, and had a good career overall in baseball. He's on the list this year.
J.D. Drew.
Yeah, that's amazing. JD Drew, we haven't heard his name in a while. He's up on the list. And it's an honor for these players to make the list and be nominated in the baseball writers, but I don't know. I don't know how many quality names you should have on there just to fill out a list, but we'll see how they do in overall voting. I think they have to score at least a certain amount of percentage to remain on the ballot. So we'll have to see how some of these players do. But as usual, it'll be interesting to see which way the voting goes. Of course, Barry Bonds still on there. And last year he got 44.3% of ballots. So maybe he's got a few sympathy votes out there.
And Roger Clemens, too. It'll be interesting to see if their vote goes up this year because maybe some of the guys that were so adamant about not voting for steroid era players are changing their mind. However, now Manny Ramirez, you mentioned, probably could be a strong Hall of Famer, but I don't think he'll ever get in because he actually was suspended once or twice for substance abuse. So I don't think he would have a have a chance, but he's definitely got the numbers and should be. And then, of the new guys that listed, I could see Pudge Rodriguez maybe getting in someday. Now, I don't think he's a first year. Guerrero, same thing. Not a first year, but probably a Hall of Famer to some degree. Maglio Ordonez was on track and just had a lot of injuries, so I don't think he'll make it. It's interesting to see and watch whom Sammy Sosa's still on the ballot, but he only had 7% last year. So not a stellar list. Trevor Hoffman might get in, and he's the all-time save leader, but a lot of people don't like him even in the Hall of Fame. But if you don't have your all-time leaders in there, and that goes back to our big gripe that Pete Rose should be in.
Yeah, so we'll have to see how this vote shakes out. It comes around, I believe, the 25th of January, somewhere around there. Got to get 75% of the ballots to get inducted into the Hall of Fame. So be interesting to see who makes it this year. And some years there's nobody that makes it. So as you said, Gary, I'll be interested to see if some of those players' totals go up this year.
That's for sure, Rich. And all we can do is wait and see. Unless the ballots start coming out, they have to release. Not this year. The next year, I think they have to release them who they voted for. Which is going to be interesting because are they going to release it ahead of time? Because then it'll take the whole suspense out of it. If you can see how everybody voted, you'll know who got in. Better to wait until they release the results. But, that stuff always sneaks out, and we'll see.
Yeah, and I think it should be private myself. I don't think your vote should become public knowledge for one reason or another. That's just my opinion. But, the thing with the voting is it's changed over the years. It's been revised. It's been constantly updated with the times. So I guess, now it's all an open book, but I don't know if they should reveal that.
Well, I think it's all that transparency nonsense that they want to do now, and don't, everything is considered secret, and they don't want to do that. But we'll see what goes on with that. But Rich, the hot stove is kind of more like a lukewarm stove right now. Not a lot of talk going on about traders. We're still waiting for that first shoe to drop. Encarnacion or Bautista or Trumbo, one of those guys. I think it's going to be a busy January and February, I think, because once one of them goes, they're all going to start dropping, I think.
Yeah, and you wonder why they haven't gone yet, and the issue is probably money, that some of these agents are holding out for these millions of dollars anymore. If you hear a pitcher or a position player sign for 10 or 12 or 15 million, you shrug it off like, oh, it's 13 million, That's a lot of money.
It certainly is.
These players are probably asking for a whole ton more than that. So I just don't understand how baseball got into the position of paying certain players millions and millions and millions of dollars. There was talk of Bryce Harper when he comes on the market, when he's finally a free agent, of somewhere in the neighborhood of a $400 million contract for him. And that's kind of inconceivable to me, to play baseball for $400 million. I think there needs to be a ceiling up there somewhere.
Well, look, if he puts fannies in the seats and he can produce, I guess it's what the market bears. But Bryce Harper better put up some good, consistent years, because he really hasn't been a $400 million ball player right now. Up to this point, he had the one good year, didn't have had an off year last year, and that's kind of been the pattern. So I don't, I get a kick out of you hear some of these young guys now with these, well, we got to make sure we want to get that big contract and everything. Well, put up some numbers. We've been hearing that about Matt Harvey in New York, and while he's put up some nice numbers, he's been injured a lot, missed 2 years already practically, and I'm not seeing no consistent 20-game winner here every year. We're not talking about Koufax here. We're not talking about Bob Gibson with these guys. We're not talking about Mickey Mantle, with numbers that would blow your mind out. And I guess it goes back to the Hall of Fame thing as well, because, those were guys you knew were going to the Hall of Fame. And a guy like Harper, right? There's probably only one guy right now that I would say is worth $400 million if you were going to take a market to that level, and that would have to be your boy Mike Trout. I mean, the guy puts up unbelievable numbers every year so far. I know he's only been 5 years now, but every year his numbers have been so consistently high. Every year he's over 300. Every year he's got 25 to plus home runs. Every year 100 RBI. I mean, that's consistency. What Harper does, 1 year is hitting 345, the next year he's hitting 260 or 215 or something. He's got to put some things. You can't, just because you've built up this reputation of being a dangerous hitter, then expect to get the top dollar in the league. I want to see some consistency.
Absolutely, that's where it's at. So we'll have to keep our eyes on the hot stove. As Gary said, there's plenty of players left in that hot stove to be claimed. And it'll be interesting to find out where they end up. And I guess at this point in the game, they're not very nervous, Gary, but 100 days left in the season and they don't know where they're playing yet. I kind of would start to get a little nervous myself. I'm wondering if anybody would sign me.
I would think so, Rich. And I'm trying to see it. I read a story today, and I don't know where I read it now, and I can't seem to find it. But these guys are trying to find a home, and there's one guy that's been on 4 teams this offseason alone, and he's with your Phillies now, I believe. A left-handed pitch. I cannot remember his name, but he was on the Seattle Mariners roster. They released him. He got picked up by the Cubs, I believe. 4 days later, he must have been put on waivers, because then he was picked up by Texas. Spent a scintillating 9 days as a Texas Ranger before being picked up by the Philadelphia Phillies. So I think the Phillies has been his longest tenure this off season, and it's been like 10 or 12 days. So, a left-handed pitcher, 28 years old, can't remember his name. Dave something.
I'll have to look that one up myself. I haven't really run across his name yet, but yeah, the Phillies have been picking up players here and there, some people that they think will make a nice contribution to the 2017 season. It'll be interesting to see how that works out for them. And some of the other teams around the league have been picking up some not big name players, but players that are going to get the job done for them. So that's a lot of these teams that aren't like your Boston Red Sox, New York Yankees, teams like that. They're picking up players that aren't as well known, but they're still going to get out there and do a good job for your team. So that's what I always look forward to baseball. Some new stars are always born, guys that you don't hear the name of them, but they get out onto the field and play their hearts out. So it'd be interesting to see when that 2017 season starts up.
Yeah, it certainly will, and I can't wait.
Let's take a look at a little bit of the odds for the 2017 World Series. Of course, before the big trade with Chris Sale going to the Boston Red Sox, the Red Sox were 9-1 in November to win the 2017 World Series. And after that trade, which happened right around December 7th, they went to 11-2. So they jumped right underneath the Chicago Cubs now, Gary, as 1-2 favorites to win the World Series in 2017.
Well, they'll all be weeping when the Mets win it. So, where are the Mets on that list, Rich?
Well, let me check it out for you here. And evidently, the bookmakers out in Vegas did not like what they did from November to December, because in November the odds were 14-1, and now December 7th, the latest update that I've gotten, 18-1 the New York Mets. So apparently maybe they don't like some of the moves that they've made in the off season,
or lack of moves, perhaps. Really, probably the only thing they really did was sign Cespedes. They signed a couple of low minor league pitchers, or former major league pitchers that they're giving minor league contracts to. But yeah, we haven't done much. And rumor has it here that they're trying to work a trade for a center fielder. They talked to the Pirates about McCutchen. Apparently, they've talked to the Rockies about Blackman. They've also talked to the Reds about Billy Hamilton. I like Hamilton's speed. I just, you can't steal first base though. And so you really want somebody that can get on base a lot more. And McCutchen probably would be worth it, but it's going to cost you a boatload of people. And kind of surprises me after an off year that he had that they'd still want that many, a lot of folks in that trade. But who knows, maybe a nice three-way trade will happen somewhere along the line. And we need to have something kickstart this off season. It's kind of when it always kind of dies out around Christmas time, but this year's really went dead after the winter meetings. And the winter meetings, to be honest with you, I don't think were as exciting as they were last year or 2 years ago, definitely. So it's been kind of a quiet off season.
Yes, it has. As time just slips away and gets towards the holidays, you wonder when it's going to actually pick up, because as you said, there's a few more big names out there. They have to land somewhere, and maybe some of these teams are starting to draw a line in the sand as far as how much and how many years they're going to commit to a certain player, especially those that are maybe over 30 years of age. Maybe they don't want to do it. So it'll be interesting to see where some of these players end up.
Well, I think a couple of two really had unrealistic ideas of what they were worth. I mean, Jose Bautista is 36, and he was looking for I think 20 million a year or $100 million contract. I don't think he's going to get it. He only hit 25 only, but he had a kind of an off year last year, and I don't, if Encarnacion is having this much trouble, and they say now he's patient. Now the rumor was at the baseball meetings that he was nervous. Now all of a sudden he got patience. So I don't know. Maybe he got. They say the 6 teams put offers on the table, so maybe that made him a little bit more patient. But I think sometimes these guys overestimate themselves, and I think that while there's still a lot of money going out, I think teams are looking at players and trying. You can remember a few years ago where they were giving ridiculous contracts to ridiculous players. I mean, guys were getting $10 million that were really, $4 or $5 million players. And now I think they've stopped that, a lot of that. A lot of people say that a lot of teams, let's take the Mets again, Jay Bruce. A lot of teams don't think he's worth $13 million a year. And that's why the Mets may be having a trouble trying to move him, because they don't see him as a $13 million a year player. So will the Mets have to kick some cash back to get rid of him? Maybe. But I think that's what teams are looking at now, and trying to spend them. They're still spending the money, but they're trying to be more specific or get the guy and that they think deserves that kind of money.
And we'll keep an eye out on it for you.
You've got mail.
And in the meantime here, I think I just heard something that I used to hear years ago.
Yeah. You got mail thing.
Yeah, there it goes again, Gary. I don't know. I think we just
You've got mail.
We just got the mail in. The mail call. We got a nice email from a listener out in New York State, Mr. Jeff Cohen, and he wanted to stop by and tell us he really enjoyed the podcast of the Baseball Talk radio show. He especially liked the Hall of Fame talk, and he's got some tips for our listeners if you're considering going out to the Hall of Fame. The best time to go, he says, to Cooperstown is in January and February, and the reason is because the Hall of Fame is empty. In fact, a friend and I went there about 10 years ago, and a guide approached us to explain some of the Hall of Fame plaques, etc. He ended up giving us a private tour, even took some items out of the vault to show us. So they spent the whole day there, had a great time the next day even at the museum. So, yeah, he told us the best time to go is, of course, January and February, but do watch the weather forecasts out there.
Yes, that would be the thing that would deter me from going in January or February. And Jeff is a great guy. He's a big listener of our shows, and thanks so much, Jeff. Apparently, he likes the Cooperstown Diner too, because he likes he says the food is great there. It's very small, but it's a great place to eat. So a little travel tip there. But, yeah, that's the thing that would concern me would be the weather, because up there, that's snow country, boy. And we're talking feet, not inches. So I guess it would not – I can think of worse places to get snowed in if you could still walk to the Hall of Fame. But, yeah, you got to really check the weather. And check the weather there. Don't just look at your local weather. You got to find out what the weather is up there.
Long-range forecast.
Mm-hmm.
So Jeff finishes up by saying, enjoying the podcast and can't wait for the season to begin. Well, thank you very much for the email. And if you're listening out there, drop us a line. You can go right to the website, mlbthisweek.com. If you don't want to do that, you can email Gary directly, gary@baseballtalkradio.com, or you could email myself, rich@baseballtalkradio.com, and we'll be glad to share your email if you'd like with the listeners.
And Rich, lots of stuff on the burners for the rest of the off seasons. We have a couple of authors that are gonna come on and tell us about their books, and I'm not gonna give out any names because some of them might be recognizable, and we want to surprise the folks. But it's gonna be a great off season, and we're gonna continue to be here talking baseball and talking to others about baseball.
Yes, that's for sure. And we want to let our listeners know that we'll be taking a holiday break of a couple weeks. So if you don't hear from us, we're just enjoying our holiday at home with our families, shopping, doing those other things that everybody else does. So we're going to talk to you in the 2017 year. It'll be our second year that we're doing this particular show here, Talking Baseball. And Gary, I just can't wait for it. As you said, we have some nice guests that we're considering lining up for the show, talking baseball with our listeners out there. Some real bright people, some authors, and some funny guys. So be sure to tune in and stay with us into the new year. And I want to take this time to wish everybody a very happy new year for 2017, and especially you, Gary. It's great doing the show with you.
And the same to you, Rich. It's always a pleasure, and we always have a lot of fun talking and talking baseball and hanging out for an hour every week. And I'm gonna miss it the next couple of weeks, but like you say, holidays come in. We'll be with our families and having some fun there. So, like you said, everybody out there, happy holidays, happy New Year. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and make it a safe one so you can all come back and listen to us in 2017.
Absolutely. Have a great time, everyone, and we'll talk to you in the new year.